2014, the church began recognizing individuals that exemplified the work of God. They were called Christian soldiers and are honored during a Sunday service.
So, if you had the privilege of growing up at Goodlettsville Cumberland Presbyterian Church as a child, you had the blessing and the honor to know a lady that we all loved and had a lot of respect for here. Her name was Miss Elkins. Miss Elkins was passionate about teaching children. She was passionate about teaching adults about Christ and bringing them to Christ, but her heart was always with children. We had a chance to be in her Sunday school class every Sunday, but it was more than that. We also went on Wednesday nights in her little subdivision, which was up on Altaloma Road. There were several of us that met every Wednesday night, and we'd sit around at her feet, and we would listen to her Bible stories come to life on her big felt boards that she had. She had these big felt boards, and she had these little bitty characters that she would stick to the felt boards and just bring those Bible stories to life. So a few years ago, I work in Promised Land with our children's ministry, and I thought, man, that would be a great service project to go visit Miss Elkins. And I knew it was getting closer to the end of her life, and she was living with Peggy, her daughter, at the time. And so we all packed up one Sunday after church, and we went over to see her. And Miss Elkins was sitting in a little chair, and we just all wanted to visit with her. And I wanted the kids to get to know her because she was just such an important part of our children's ministry at our church. And so as we were all sitting around, she asked Peggy to bring her a little box of things, and they were her little felt figures that she used to put on her board. And she didn't have her board. She said, "Oh, I don't have my board. I donated it. I don't have that anymore." But she took her blanket and she laid it across her lap, and she took her little felt characters, and she told a story to the children, and it was just special. Miss Elkins is just a role model, and she is probably one of the most humble, godly servants of the Lord. And I won't even mention that she knew more about the Bible than anybody at this church that has ever walked through those doors. She always left me with one thing at the end of all of her little Sunday school lessons or her Bible studies. She'd always say, all you got to do is ask Jesus to come into your heart, and he'll be there forever. And there's a little door there. And visually, I always, as a child, I thought, a door. And she said, all you got to do is just open it. He's there knocking. And so that's just something that's always been in my mind, that's always been in my heart, and I can visually see that door to this day of my heart.
Judy Davis gave it her all. It's hard emotionally for me to talk about Judy because I considered her my best friend. But she was the best friend to a lot of people. It just depended on who needed her at that moment. She loved teaching the Bible. She taught in Sunday school. She taught on Wednesday nights, and she served in her circle. One of her favorite places to serve God was feeding the homeless at the Presbyterian Church downtown. Judy prayed about everything. She prayed for everybody, and she also prayed for parking places. And if you were ever out in the car with her, it worked, and even continues to work, because I get a lot of front row parking places because I think Judy has asked for me a front row parking place so I don't have to walk so far. She inspired everybody every day to be a better Christian, and I feel like that's what she did for me. Was she inspired me to be better and better every day. I got custody of her fish because the girls didn't want to take care of them, so I still have one of them left, and he waves to me every morning. He's right beside my breakfast table. So I have constant reminders in a lot of parts of my life of her and the impact that she made on my life.
Joe was very friendly and liked to talk. He especially enjoyed greeting visitors and was accused by one pastor of shaking hands with a doorknob. Joe was often teased about being so careful with his money. He was a great money manager, but that allowed him to be generous, not only to the church, but also to family, friends, and anyone who needed his help. I hope this gives you an idea of the kind of service that Joe contributed to the church. He loved this church, and he wanted to do his part without calling attention to himself. Knowing he was doing the right thing was enough for him. Joe was a wonderful person, and he taught me so many things. And one of those was the importance of love and service, not only to the church, but to his family and friends. I am a better person for having the privilege of being married to him for over 35 years.
Miss America. Mary Katherine was Miss America to Joe and to all of us who knew her for many, many years. Mary Katherine was always very supportive in everything for the church, everything that Joe tried to do. I remember those nights that he was out trying to get people to church 4, 5, 6 nights a week. She was always the homemaker, always supportive, always there behind him. She was an Ole Miss football fan. If Ole Miss was on football was on Saturday afternoon, you could bet Mary Katherine was watching Ole Miss football. And then we bowled on a bowling team together with Darrell Walden, Mary Katherine, and Betty and I in the Madison Church League for several years. And we won, mainly because Mary Katherine was one of the better bowlers in the league. If you looked up the description of a preacher's wife, you could write Mary Katherine. She was ideal and always in the background, but always supportive, always greeting people, a friend to everybody. So she was an ideal pastor's wife.
John not only was a faithful member of this church, but he was also a personal friend. And I have been in the ministry now for over 30 years, and I grew up in the ministry. My grandfather was a pastor, my dad was a pastor. And very rarely in my life have I ever seen anybody have the spiritual leadership of John Combs. And not only was it within the church, but his real leadership was outside of the walls of this church, as he was absolutely committed to influencing and impacting this community for Christ.
My father, he loved Brussels sprouts. I did not. In telling this story, and as you all know my father, just keep in mind how strong-willed my father was, as am I. Whenever we had Brussels sprouts for dinner, there was always a battle over getting me to eat just one Brussels sprout. I would resist, but he always won. I would eventually always get one choked down. But around the age of 7, I was bound and determined that I was going to be 100% defiant and not take one bite. Mama sat my plate of dinner in front of me that included one Brussels sprout. I ate all my food and left that one Brussels sprout sitting in the middle of that plate. I said, I'm not going to eat it. And my father looked at me with a stern look and he said, you're going to eat that Brussels sprout. I shook my head no. At 7 years old, I was defying my father for the first time to take a stand for my independence of what I didn't want to eat. He told me I wasn't moving from that seat until that Brussels sprout was in my belly. I sat there. They began cleaning the dishes and putting up the leftovers. And when the kitchen was just about cleaned, I realized he wasn't going to let me go until I ate that Brussels sprout. So I finally gave in. And as I started peeling back the first leaf to gag it down, I threw up right in the middle of my plate all over that Brussels sprout. He did not blink. He calmly picked up that plate, threw the plate away, didn't even wash it off, grabbed that Brussels sprout and that vomit, washed it off, grabbed a clean plate out of the cabinet, sat it back in front of me, and as calmly but authoritatively as possible in a tone, he pointed his finger in my face. He said, you're going to eat that Brussels sprout. And at that point, my mom intervened. John, you can't make him eat that Brussels sprout. I was yelling at him. I won. That was the last time I ever tried to eat a Brussels sprout.